Let's get started. Please join me in welcoming Rob Berger and Andrew Grenville to the stage. Yay!
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Yes, good morning. After the armadillo racing, that's kind of funny, right? I love that. But this morning I woke up and I had to pay some bills, which is, you know, the great way to start a day, right? Everybody loves that. And then it occurred to me that one thing we all have in common is essentially we're like Buddhist monks. And Buddhist monks go out in the morning with their alms bowls looking for donations. So they exist off the goodwill of others. And as I paid my bills today, I realized really all of us, in this room anyway, exist off the goodwill of others. We make a living by having people willing to do our surveys, right? If they weren't willing, if they didn't give us that gift, we wouldn't get it. Now, we think, okay, maybe we pay them. Really? We pay them 50 cents? We pay them $1? Does that matter? No, it doesn't. And I'll show you some data that really doesn't matter. It doesn't really make any difference beyond a kind of honorific kind of gesture. Because if people are doing it for the money, they're doing it for fraud, right? Or they're doing it from Venezuela where they're desperate and they're faking a URL. We really exist off the goodwill of others. We exist from the voice of the people. We exist because respondents are actually willing to do our surveys. Yesterday there was discussion of talking about sample as if it were inventory. And if we think about sample, the definition of sample is a finite part of a statistical population whose properties are studied to gain information about the whole. It's accurate, right? That's what sample is supposed to be. But it's not exactly warm. It's not exactly kind. It's not exactly recognizing that these are something other than experimental subjects, right? But we talk about it less kindly as inventory, more kindly as sample, and then sometimes we get all warm and fuzzy and we call people respondents. And that's when we think about them as people who are subjects. Again, it's from our perspective. We want them to be responding to our request, right? So it's not exactly us thinking about it from their perspective, it's about them being subjects in a study. And I think what you call people matters. What you call things, if you want to denigrate something, you can demonize something by calling people other things. You can be racist, you can make someone feel like they're other, and it's easier to treat them badly if you give them a name other than a person. So I think we need to go beyond thinking about inventory, because that's not really what it is. It's not just sample, though, yes, objectively, they are a sample. And are they respondents? Are they just there for our whims to do a 20-minute survey because we want them to? It's not why they're doing it. I think we need to change the words that we use. I think we need to think about the people that are in our surveys as people, right? They are people, and we count on them. We do exist on the goodwill of others. And we need to think very deeply about that. I know it's super easy for us to just kind of grind them through and not think about it very much, but if we don't stop, step back, think about the foundations of our business, it's not going to work. It's like we're draining water out of a lake for our own uses, and if we don't pay attention to replenishing that lake, making sure that there's good, clean water coming in, eventually it's going to dry up. And that's what's happening to us right now as an industry. Our response rates are going down because we don't treat sample as people. So why do people do surveys? Is it for the money? Well, not really. This is a great study that was done a few years back. It's a meta-analysis. That Anna Goritz did out of the University of Freiburg in Germany. And she looked at the effect across a few hundred studies of the effect of incentives. And what we're looking at here is the lift that you get by having incentives versus not having incentives based on the incidence of your population. Basically, the line is flat and very low because the studies have very little impact. The incentives have very little impact. And we've done experiments where we used to pay $1 for people to do our omnibus. So we got about a 30% response rate. And you look across Canada, the US, and the UK. We dropped that in half to 50 cents to see what would happen for another couple hundred studies. Our response rates went from 30% to 31%. We saved some bucks, which was great.
Help the bottom line.
Yeah, we loved that part. But it just shows, along with this, that it's really not about the money. And if it is about the money, you've probably got a problem. And you're probably attracting problem respondents that you're going to have to clean out and pay for anyway. So there is real value, true value, in treating our respondents as people. And when you think about people, and if you picture the person doing the survey as maybe it's a friend of yours, I mean, would you ask them to do 8 brands by 32 attributes? Would you send your mother to some of the surveys that you run? You might hear about that, right, for a while afterwards. You probably wouldn't. So if we picture people, real people, people we know, people we like, people we want to have an ongoing relationship with, as the people subjects doing our surveys, I think we might think a little differently about it. So, Rob, you want to talk a bit about why people actually do surveys?
Yes, so we actually have people on our panel, and we call them people. And it's funny, I was actually thinking about this morning. My son is almost 13, and he's discovered that he can sign up for surveys as a very young teenager. And he started doing some of the surveys, and immediately said, "Daddy, what you do is terrible." I was on a survey yesterday for 20 minutes. I don't know what it was about. I'm not even sure if they knew who I was. So there's a real disconnect. It really, brought to light that disconnect between, what we think we're doing and what is being perceived by the respondents or the people that, we really rely on and their goodwill to do this work. So we surveyed 1,500 people. Let me just click on this thing. Okay. And about 90% of them agreed with the following statement. They really felt like their opinion made a difference. That's why they were there to do the work. They weren't there, again, to get incentives or some other value. They were there because they want to share their opinion. And if they're not there to share their opinion, as Andrew was saying, it's a problem. They also really felt, I like being what they referred to as a trusted advisor. They felt like they wanted to be part of the process. They wanted to be contributing to what the outcomes would be. And they wanted to give the feedback to companies, or if it was in a social type of survey, be able to influence opinion in their community and in their country. So it really is that relationship, and this is why they're people. They're not just sample or respondents, there is somebody ultimately sitting at the end of that pathway to the survey. And the other really interesting thing is people do want to be good. Andrew was talking about, these people are giving their time, they're donating their time. They're actually there saying, I'm happy to give you 15 minutes or 10 minutes or 5 minutes, hopefully not an hour, of their time, and provide feedback as a citizen. They're part of the community, they're part of our the country that they live in, and they want to feel like they're contributing to society ultimately. And again, that's why we have to continue to look at them as people and not just as sample. And they want to hear their voice. They want their voice to be heard. They want to hear what they're saying. They want to hear what others are saying. It really comes back to something we've been talking about for a very long time at Maru and in some of our previous incarnations, as our name has changed over time. We've talked about community. And communities are important. The world functions on communities. And if you bring people into a community, if they don't feel their voice is heard, they're actually not going to know, they're not going to feel like people are listening or they care. And they're just going to tune out. It's not going to matter if you give them $5 incentive, $10 incentive. They know that you don't care, so they no longer care. So it was really important in the feedback we got that people felt that they wanted to know their voice was being heard. And they want to learn new things. Again, everybody in this room is very curious. I know a lot of you for a long time. We sit around and talk about all types of interesting things, but we always want to learn from others. I was reading actually an interesting quote from Warren Buffett this morning. He said, always surround yourself with people who know more than you do. Because if you surround yourself with people who don't know as much that know less than you do, you won't learn. So people are intrinsically interested in learning new things, and surveys and what we're doing as an industry to provide them with interesting, not boring, not long and tedious surveys is allowing them to learn new things. And 82% agreed that they do like doing surveys when they get paid, but the incentive is nice. They still want something because people do put some value on their time. You can't give them nothing, but it's not really the main reason they answer the survey. They really want to hear directly, from us. They want to understand more about what the organizations that are reaching out to them are interested in teaching them, and what their friends are also saying. So we asked some people what they would tell their friends they liked about doing surveys, and we actually have some fun videos coming up here.
3 things that I enjoy about surveys. Coming up with opinions from stuff I don't usually think of, being exposed to new marketing ideas, and learning about new companies.
Okay, the surveys are fun. I like giving my comments, and I like giving my opinions. I become more informed, and I like to review the products as well.
Being chosen, that makes you feel as though you have a worthy opinion. The second thing would be to take part and give your opinion, speak on what it is you feel strongly about, and feel like you're contributing something and at the same time learning something. And I think the last thing is probably whatever remuneration you get. That's kind of nice.
That I enjoy being a part of new products, giving my opinion. I am a shopper, so I know about buying different products and what I like and what I don't like.
The best thing about doing surveys is you're able to influence others' opinions. You know your answer will be taken into consideration for future products. It's important that companies recognize your opinion because essentially by doing surveys, you are shaping the world around you.
I don't have to put pants on, although I usually do.
Yeah, so I was watching them again. I've seen these before, but every time I watch them, I laugh. Particularly, that gentleman is quite humorous. It is online, so I've seen other videos where people have not had their shirt on. We didn't include those. But even the gentleman before I said, do your job. We did not pay him to wear that T-shirt when he was being filmed. So, but it's a good commentary on what we're talking about. Like, it is important for us to do our job and treat these people as people. and feed them surveys that they will enjoy. So it was kind of fun that worked out. The other thing we asked the people in the survey is to say, we asked them what they
Surveys would be smarter. They would know who.
Let me just pause that for a second. Let me go back. We asked them also, what is things that make you unhappy? And really the thing that always came up was disqualification. I don't think that's a surprise to anyone in this room. It is the scourge of what we do. It's you send people a survey, you ask them a raft of demographic questions, they answer all those questions, and data that we've pulled shows that 9 out of 10 people who get invited to a survey disqualify. So imagine if you invited 10 people over to your house for dinner, and then when they showed up, you said, 9 of you? Yeah, you're not coming in. Like, I decided I don't like you. I know I wanted you to come to this dinner, but no longer do I want you to sit down at the dinner. One person come in, sit down. What do you think those 9 people would think? They'd probably hate you forever. We also did some interesting financial analysis on this a couple years ago to try to understand what is the actual financial impact, because that's typically what gets organizations like ourselves to pay attention. And we actually were able to identify that it was costing us a quarter, 25 cents, Canadian in this case, which is like, I don't know, 15 cents American, that it was costing us a quarter per disqualification. And that was an actual churn related to the loss of respondents who got so upset that they weren't invited in for dinner that they said, I'm never coming back, I am gone forever. And that adds up, those quarters add up like crazy when you're doing millions and millions of surveys and you're, in theory, disqualifying tens of millions of people a year to get those few million surveys that you're trying to identify. So, we keep on asking these qualifying questions. We invite people to surveys. They don't qualify. They end up in ugly routers, and they never get anywhere. Whereas with a community or that ability, which we were talking about earlier, to treat them like people, and I know that I'm left-handed. I like to barbecue. So if Weber wanted to come and talk to left-handed men who like to barbecue, we could go directly to me and actually get me into the survey rather than just asking 1,000 men, are you left-handed, do you barbecue, et cetera, and then disqualifying, again, 9 out of 10 of those folks. So here's another video.
Surveys would be smarter. They would know who I am, and I wouldn't have to answer the same questions over and over. That repetitive kind of clicking of how old I am, where I live, what my demographic is, how much money I make, is kind of a nuisance. And sometimes the surveys, the way they're platformed or set up, can be really obnoxious and time consuming. And I just wish they'd be more pragmatic and smarter.
When surveys drag on too long, then you lose interest and don't give the answers that really mean something.
Repetitive surveys where you answer the same questions over and over and it takes forever. Small boxes to click on hurt your arm. I like when you have a selection, when you have like 20 questions to answer, when you don't have to be so precise. The ones that you have to be so precise are you always end up missing a couple and going back and doing it all over again.
What bugs me about doing surveys would have to be, I don't like how it is only available on a desktop version. Well, for this website, make mobile survey more accessible.
It really bugs me when I get far into a survey and have invested a lot of time into it, and it disqualifies me, or I get to the very end of it and it disqualifies me. I would rather be disqualified after the first 1, 2, 3 questions.
The thing that bugs me the most is sometimes it takes double the amount of time it says it would really take to do.
The bad thing about doing surveys that really bugs me is that sometimes they're too repetitive and they're asking questions that make no sense, and there's no way to say that they're not applicable.
The one thing that really bugs me about surveys is when I get a few minutes into them, 5-10 minutes, and then it tells me that I don't qualify. I just feel like it's a huge waste of my time, especially if I make it through the qualifying and they get halfway done with the survey and then it cuts out and says that they've met their quota. It just seems like they don't value my time.
So that last video, always the very end, I always laugh again, because if we don't want non-attentive respondents, we wouldn't invite that lady to a survey because she has her child's completely unattended in the back of the video eating cereal while she's talking to her computer. So, but again, just a really, real life, these are real people, and they really are quite concerned about the types of content that we're feeding to them.
Great, thanks, Rob. So a little while back, I was reading some content online, and up popped an ad from Vice, the media company, saying, hey, would you like to join our community? And I thought, okay, I mean, I've been reading your content. I'm curious for, as a job. That's what I do, I'm curious. And so I joined their community, and they ran me through some profiling questions, age, gender, region, yada, 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 some of the basics. And then they tossed me out into the river, where I was then again asked age, gender, income, region. And then I got asked a bunch of questions like, do you have a turtle? Or have you run a half marathon or full marathon in the past 6 months? I mean, clearly the video camera was not on because I have not run a half marathon in the past 6 months. I also got asked, did you personally design your company's logo? Have you personally identified a potential acquisition target that your company bought? Do you currently use any left-handed computer peripherals? Well, I'm not Rob, so no.
I'm actually ambidextrous, so I use all right-handed, but I do everything else left-handed.
Okay, well, then there we go. So Rob would be the perfect target. So I got asked all these things, and oddly enough, I had not designed the company's logo. So I didn't qualify. So what happened to me? I got tossed back into the river. I got asked age, gender, education, region, and then I got asked a bunch of other crazy things that really there was no they're like a sub 1%, sub 2% incidence. But I had to go through that experience of being asked the same things over and over again, and then being presented with things that I couldn't possibly qualify for. Then I got asked more things, like had I skydived in the past 3 months? Did I own a turtle? Had I installed an automated sprinkler system in the past 6 months? And what made it all worse was that I joined thinking, be interesting to do some surveys around Vice and their content, but that wasn't what it was all about at all. They lured me into a community, but have never actually sent me a survey about anything to do with their community. All I was fodder to go into the river. Not a great respondent experience. And again, we're counting on those people for our livelihood, right? That's how we pay the bills. It's the goodwill of others. And that's how we're treating them. And I wondered, why did I have to answer those same age, gender, whatever questions over and over again, right? Because that's actually not necessary. We've done research where we looked at what happens if you don't ask all the demographics, you just pull them in from your community, and you don't re-ask all those things. Well, 99% of the time, because we compared answer in a survey to profiling data we pulled in, and 99% of the time the answer was exactly the same. So it's not a necessity unless the person's not actually part of a community. If the person's actually part of a community, you can pull those data in and you don't have to abuse them by asking those questions over and over again. So being a bit of a chump, and after this experience, a little curious, I got invited to be part of another community. And so I entered age, gender, region, education, and it said, great, you're accepted for a survey. It sent me to a page which said, oh, well, it was very polite. Let me just tell you what it said. It said, unfortunately, based on your responses to pre-qualification questions, it looks like your profile isn't a great fit for the survey we had in mind for you. Hold on, while we check to see if we have something better. I mean, that was a very polite way of brushing me off. So then it sent me back and asked me again, age, gender, region, education. And then I thought, ah, great, there's a survey for me. I clicked through, and I got, unfortunately, based on your responses to pre-qualification. So I was like, what? Seriously? What's this glitch? Like, what is this? So I did it again, because I thought, I've got to get a survey here. I've got to see what this is all about. Because now it's starting to piss me off, right? So I do it again. Go through, it says, yeah, we found you a survey. It sends me to a page that says, unfortunately, based on your responses, you don't qualify. So I qualify, but I don't qualify. So this is now, I'm digging in here, right? I do this for 20 minutes. 20 minutes. Maybe not the best use of my time, but, you know. Over and over. I get asked the same questions. I get told I qualify, and then I get told that I don't, based on nothing. So then, I realized there was a button at the bottom that said skip surveys. And it took me to this community's engagement page. And that's where, you know, it's like Groundhog Day, that thing over and over and over again. You keep clicking, you keep clicking, you keep getting the same messages. You qualify, you don't qualify. You qualify, you don't qualify. Then I got to this landing page. And it was interesting. So they have a bunch of little kind of engagement slogans on the side that's part of their Facebook feed. And the first one I saw was, airbags kill one person for every 22 lives they save. And I thought, well, that's kind of weird. Like, where are they going with this? So then it sent me to this list of things that you could click through. And it was morbid. It said, the next one was, you're more likely to die on your birthday than any other day of the year. So it's just like Alice in Wonderland, right? So the rabbit hole went straight on like a tunnel for some way and then dipped suddenly down so suddenly that Alice had not a moment to think about stopping herself before she found herself falling down what seemed to be a very deep well. And it was a very deep well. It was very strange. Next one was, more than 10 people a year are killed by vending machines. Oh, happy day. Every year, oh, sorry, Rob. Every year, more than 2,500 left-handed people are killed from using right-handed products. This must be a lefty with a grudge.
It's good I'm ambidextrous. I'm not going to die today.
Yeah, that's right. Whew, that's why you're still alive.
Still alive. But I might get killed by the vending machine at the airport, you know, on the way to the plane.
Yeah, exactly. In the US, between 2004 and 2015, there were 10 cases involving dogs shooting their owners, versus only one involving a cat. So then, after going through this litany, they offered up one more, which perhaps they thought that those were a bit dark. They said, in the course of a lifetime, you will, while sleeping, eat 70 assorted insects and 10 spiders. I don't know where you get that data. 10 spiders, exactly 10? Not 9, not 11, 12, no, 7, no, 10. 10 spiders, lovely thought. So that's respondent engagement as the way some people do it. I'm not sure that that's the best way to go. Let's hear some other dislikes from some of the people that we've spoken to.
Then you lose interest and don't give the answers that really mean something.
Repetitive surveys where you answer the same questions over and over and it takes forever. Small boxes to click on hurt your arm. I like when you have a selection, when you have like 20 questions to answer, when you don't have to be so precise. The ones that you have to be so precise are you always end up missing a couple and going back and doing it all over again.
What bugs me about doing surveys would have to be, I don't like how it is only available on a desktop version. Well, for this website, make mobile survey more like
Sorry, I think it's repeating the same video. But,
The one thing though about that video that opens up and she says it so quietly, but it's the one thing that terrifies me. She says, you know, when it's really long and you don't give answers that mean anything. It's like, whoa, okay, so yes, you're saying you're so bored that you're just answering randomly, and you're compliant enough and have enough goodwill toward us that you'll actually do the video. But answers that don't mean something are the worst kind of data we can possibly collect. That's where we produce something that isn't insightful, that doesn't lead towards better intelligence. It leads towards us having noise in our information. And we can give misleading information as a result. And what happens with that? We undermine our whole industry.
So we actually did another survey, and this one was actually on purpose. So we invited people to participate in a very tedious, not like that, survey that would have very long grids, all the things we know are not enjoyable, create a lot of the bad data that Andrew's been talking about, and really taint what we're outputting to our clients. So we actually used facial coding technology as we were doing these videos to sort of evaluate the emotional response that people had as they were going through the exercise. So many people actually quit even before the video, but if they hit the 12-minute mark, which is already getting quite long, and they had made their way through these very, very long grids, as you can see on the screen, and soldiered on, we asked those who were persistent to allow us to turn on that video and use and see what those reactions were. So the first reaction, as you can see, he's either something smells really bad or it's a survey. Very disgusted. So we saw disgust. We saw contempt was what this the system picked up as this reaction. She kind of looks like, what am I doing here? And how do I get out of it? But mostly what we saw was this. And this was in multiple videos that we looked at and that the system was coding. So real boredom, like, oh my God, this is never going to end. Why am I here? Here's another. This one looks even more frustrated. Again, very bored. And this is that guy. He's sort of wearing a shirt. There was a different guy also wearing the same almost shirt. But really, really bored and just bored. And this was the number one data point that came up in the facial coding exercise as we went through this.
I do feel like maybe there are too many options for, like when selecting an answer for some of the questions. Because I know it kind of gets overwhelming. It just kind of gets tedious to have to, and then you're trying to, make sure that you clicked on the right spot for the, the categories that were there and with the brands and like the words that describe them. So maybe narrow it down or maybe cut it down or maybe do a little bit on this page and a little bit on the next page.
Tedious, repetitive, and confusing.
I don't like anything about it. It's invasive and demanding.
It truly was not that much fun.
I would like to speak to the person who wrote this survey. I would like to ask them to take this survey themselves and how that is just not a good way to treat people.
So we did apologize to these folks and let them know that they were part of an experiment because these are actually valued people in our community. So we didn't want to obviously irritate them so badly we lost them. But yeah, the reactions are, and there's more videos. Like we could sit here for 10, 15 minutes just, I know we're laughing, but it's quite concerning, really, that this is what people are saying, and this is happening as we're sitting here right now. Like this is in real time, that there are people sitting right now all over America, Canada, and the world doing surveys with these reactions, and this guy would love to talk to all of you if he could. So let's pass it back to Andrew here.
Yeah, and we apologized fairly profusely, and we gave them $10 that they didn't expect.
Yes.
Because they had to do a survey that is actually, unfortunately, typical of what happens. We need to make it better. I mean, that's the simple reality is we can keep doing this and keep, draining that lake. But soon we're going to end up with polluted water. We're going to end up with no water. Our response rates are going to continue to plummet, and we're going to be undermining ourselves. And it's a very short-term way of thinking, and I know it's hard, right? Because some people have said now, in a programmatic world, if it's a bad survey, the company can look at it and say, I'm not going to send my sample to that, right? Which is great to have that option. But the reality is, you've got salespeople who've got quotas, who've got mouths to feed, and it's really hard to say no to that. So you've got this tension that's problematic. And the only way around it is if we actually suck it up and say, okay, we need to think longer term. We need to think about this being sustainable. We need to think about being able to have money coming in from the goodwill of other people long term. We do need to step away from a lot of the practices that we do permit. We need to have some backbone and stand up when people come to us with ridiculous surveys and say no. Say no, we need to think about how we can do this smarter. So long grids, lots of attributes. Does every single respondent need to actually answer every single question? No, probably not. In fact, in most of those large attribute banks, you're probably measuring a couple of different things. So if you do a pretest with 50 people, factor analyze that, you'd realize that in fact you're probably asking the same question 20 times in different ways. Do you really need all those attributes? No. With factor analysis, you can go in and say, you know what, I can drop these 7 and I'll lose nothing because I'm actually measuring the same underlying concept. Additionally, if you've got 10 questions that you want to get data on, does every single respondent have to answer every single one of them? No. You could probably have them answer half of them and then extrapolate what their answers would be to the other ones based on the linkage that you have. So if it's a random 5, then you can probably extrapolate to the others. And there's lots of things that we can do with analysis that aren't complicated, but that make it so much easier on the respondent and allow us to be smarter about how we ask questions and maintain that goodwill. Another thing that we do a lot of is use long scales, right? So 5-point scale, 7-point scale. Well, the reality is that those scales are problematic because people are really good at picturing 1, 2, or 3 things, right? So at a glance, a person can say, oh, there's 3 things there, or there's 2 things there. But once you get past that, once you get to 4, 5, 6, 7, what happens is that people slow down. And this isn't news. I mean, this was first proven back in the 1890s. People slow down, and they start to make mistakes. That's why scales, when you compare them to binary measures, so 5-point brand rating scale, how closely do you associate this brand with this attribute? If you compare the answer to that to which of these attributes do you associate with this brand, so same notion, the scale takes 3 times longer to answer. We can be smarter about what we do. It's not like we have to change everything. It's not like we have to become Buddhist monks and shave our heads and wear the robes and go out and beg. But we do need the goodwill of others, and there's lots of intelligent things that we can do to make that better. Shorter surveys are another thing. I mean, the long surveys that we allow are really like an artifact of history. The reason we do the long surveys is because back in the day when things were starting up in the world of market research, you had to go door to door and do an in-person survey. Well, you had an interviewer there. It was fresh and new. People were asked for their opinion for the first time. They're willing to give that 45 minutes. George Gallup did great, accurate election polls because people were willing to talk to him. But he had to cram everything in there, right? So you have to ask all your demographic questions, all the questions you want answers to. This is your one shot. It's going to cost you a lot of money to get out there and get a person in front of someone. That's why we started out doing these long surveys. And the same with when we shifted to telephone. It was expensive to get someone on the phone. Well, now it doesn't cost very much at all. But we persist in doing these long surveys when we could actually do shorter, more intelligent, more agile surveys. So do one survey, learn a few things, go back, ask a few more questions, go back, ask a few more questions. That's a better way to go, and it's a better respondent experience. And if we can go back to the same people, then they actually know what we're on about, and they can see that their voice is being heard. The thing that Rob was talking about earlier that they really want. That's what they want. That's why they're there. They want to contribute. So if we can engage them in a way that allows them to contribute and to know that they're contributing, it's just a much better way to go forward. We really need to give the people what they want, right? We count on their goodwill. We are like Buddhist monks. The reason that we get fed, the reason that we can pay the bills, is that people are willing to give us their opinions and their ideas. In return, we really need to give the people what they want. Thank you. If
we still have 10 minutes.
Yeah. If there's any questions, there's microphones on the side, so the AV guys are saying, please use the microphones, otherwise no one will be able to hear the questions in the room, but also on the video.
Good morning. I thought it was a great presentation. My name is Howard Gershowitz. I've been in the industry 40 years, probably have had more experience in tenure than most people in this room, obviously. Problem is, I can't forget the last 40 years. I stood on the podium 25 years ago, 30 years ago, 35 years ago. I was national president of the Marketing Research Association, and we had the same exact conversation. I mean, better technology, we couldn't sit there and play video clips of respondents. Respondents said the same thing 30 years ago. We want our time to be valued, we think our opinions are important. We were abusing respondents. We're still abusing respondents. The average length questionnaire that my company administers, and I took the last 50 studies before I came to this conference, is 27 minutes. And that's about what we've been at for the last 25 years. So I think what you're saying is appropriate. I think what we're trying to do is commendable. But unless we sit there and actually do what we say we need to do, we're not going to change. Client companies are going to pay for the surveys. They're going to say, if I pay for it, this is what I want. I had a client years ago. He sat through, and I had a large telephone facility. We did a pretest. The questionnaire telephone was an hour and 10 minutes. And he said, this is absurd, it's ridiculous. It was the research director of a large cable company. We have to cut the hell out of this questionnaire before it's administrable. He got it down to 48 minutes, and he thought it was a gem, okay? And this was the mindset, and frankly, it still is the mindset. Length of interview, we're going to talk about it. I'm going to come back maybe 5 years from now, and I'll be in the industry 45 years. Heaven help me. But
unless a vending machine falls on you between now and then.
Yeah.
If we're going to do something, we can't talk about it. We have to do something. And I think length of interview, hearing Patrick at the beginning of his presentation said, we're going to be doing 1-minute surveys. Great. Coming to a respondent and say we ask 5 minutes of questionnaires, going back to them. Response rates dictate that that's not going to happen. We can try it, but I don't think you're going to get meaningful and measurable sample sizes that allow us to do the analysis that's needed. The big problem that we haven't discussed, we talked about it, we skirted the periphery, is unfortunately, and I think we are transparent, the amount of fraudulent surveys that are out there. I don't think we've quantified the problem. That's what we have to do to begin with. Before we can get a solution, we have to know how big the problem is. That would be my first suggestion. Second would be length of interview. I agree with you. I mean, I agreed with you 40 years ago. And we sit there, and if I had a group of my contemporaries, we would be sitting there shaking our heads. Okay, it's a length of interview conversation. Guys, you're going to be in this industry hopefully for a lot of years, as I have. It's a great industry, and it's one that I made some significant money, but I think I did good work. Unfortunately, and I mean this honestly, I'm not proud of the work that I'm doing right now, because I think with the tools that we have and some of the fraudulent practices that are going through, I'm giving my client not what I would like to give my client. That's my observation. I think it was a good presentation, and if people listen to what you're saying and follow through on what you're saying, then we can make a difference. But 35, 40 years says we're not going to do it. Someone has to be serious. Thank you.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, and thanks for being in the industry 40 years. That makes my 30 years feel young, so that's great. I think yesterday, one of the clients that was in the video, Seth from Pfizer, said, you know, what's going to happen in the near term, because we've been doing this for a long time, we've been having this conversation for a long time, but he foresees in the near term that we're going to get results that don't match up with reality, and when the day when that starts to happen is the day when people start to get fired. Because they're giving information that just misleads rather than guides. And I think we're nearing that situation where we've got twin problems. We've got fraud, and we've got respondents who are losing their goodwill to respond to us. And I know that we've been saying this over and over again, and I was talking to Andrew Cannon yesterday after our presentation, and he was like, I don't want to come back next year and give this talk again. But he will, right? And I think we'll have to keep at it and at it. I think it is like Lisa Wilding Brown had this analogy of the polar ice caps, right? We sit around and we drive our nice cars, and the polar ice caps are melting, and we say, oh boy, the polar ice caps really, we should do something about that, and we're not, right? But we get to a point where it becomes a toxic situation, and it undermines our industry, and I think we don't have a choice anymore, and I think we're getting very close to that point.
Hi. Really good presentation. I buy all of those results, the uninteresting correlation between compensation and response rates. Though I do think that we have to be really skeptical. We're very susceptible in this room to confirmation bias on results like this, that data that tells us, yeah, people don't care about getting paid. But I think it still doesn't feel right. And I guess my question, I think response rates is perhaps too narrow of a measure to really understand, because I think we've poisoned the well in a way, right? The average person in the population has some, even if they're not in a panel, they have some sense of what it feels like to take part in a survey and what it feels like to get those survey points and to have to take many, many, many 30-minute surveys in order to qualify for the gift card at the end of that. And so I think everybody has this sort of raised expectations of what it means. And so those results are tough, I think, to tease out in a clean way. So I guess my question to you would be, would your prediction be, if we took a population of respondents and we sort of made a commitment to pay them minimum wage-ish compensation, right? $3 for every 15 minutes, regardless of whether you complete or you get disqualified, whatever. You spent 15 minutes, you get $3. And you do that for an extended period of time. So 12, 18 months, say, right? So now you've got this population of people who have some confidence that you do get compensated, right? And that there's this direct correlation between the time that I spend and the compensation that I get. Would your prediction be that in the 19th and the 20th month, that response rates wouldn't be better, that the data quality wouldn't be better, and so on?
Yeah, so I think there's a need for honorariums, so because it's a symbolic gesture. Now, to be honest, we run a lot of communities where people don't get anything other than feedback, and they work very well. Typically, it's because you've got an association with a a brand or a category that you're interested in. So if you're interested in tech, you're interested in gaming, you're gonna do it for no money. My concern about paying people a minimum wage is that it's going to attract people who are going to do it professionally, and it might not attract that representative sample. But is it worth an experiment? Absolutely. It would be a very interesting experiment to do.
Yeah, and I will add that we have done, not like to do that type of experiment would be very interesting, obviously quite costly to undertake, and probably would require a number of organizations to sort of, be part of that experiment. But we do a lot of longitudinal type work where, again, we do invite people, same people with a community. Again, you can do this to do. We've done it where we've had like effectively a 3-hour survey that's broken up into, I guess that's 10 3-minute surveys. I'm doing the math right here, but a number of like ongoing surveys so you can improve the quality of data, and we've paid incentives on those, like $1 per, and then a bonus incentive on the back end, and you do actually get much improved data. So I do agree with your theory that if you could avoid the professional respondent aspect of doing that experiment, that if you do incentivize people properly, and again, you give them the shorter, more engaging surveys, you can actually collect much greater data in a much better quality manner than trying to like say, oh, here's a 2-hour survey and I'll give you $60 to do it. You're still gonna end up with bad data. So it's really about not just incentives, it's not just about the engagement, it's a number of different factors that have to be used in order to achieve the outputs that we all desire. But that would be actually a really interesting experiment. In Canada, our minimum wage is even higher, so it would be even more expensive up north. But it would be an interesting one to try out.
Thank you all for your time and attention. Let's remember to put people first.
Thank you.